Is this the west side?
This is the south.
Like where's Ron?
Actually, pull it. The angle on this isn't helping me too much. Wait, let us go back.
Or would this be the overpass here? This one right here?
That's the railroad track. I think that is the overpass. Wait, no?
Aaron, did you get my notes that? Yes, I received all of this.
Okay,
And all of the other comments that were sent as well. Okay, great. Do we have comments? Do we have copies of everyone else's comments?
Yeah,
That I'm not sure. I didn't see them in there.
Oh, you got her going.
Yep, got her going.
Would this be trap right here?
Yes, that's your app.
Okay.
This is, of course, the south. So that's the lumber store. Here.
And the blue.
How many people sent comments?
Pardon?
To Aaron? How many people sent comments?
Oh, I sent some to back there.
Anyone else sent comments? Did you bring a copy of your comment?
I did. Well, I wrote them
I
out.
have it. I can forward them in email if I need to.
It would be nice to have a copy of your comment. Did everybody get my comment?
Yes.
Yeah, an email?
Yeah.
In case you want to track it?
Yeah, I actually read through it and it actually helped me quite a bit. Helped me orient myself. For me, it's like I didn't really have too many comments. More of is I have more concerns about how to pay for a lot of these things more than anything else.
Yeah.
So that was my primary concern, but yeah, let me find it real quick and I'll forward it to you.
I'm not sure.
Manufactured home.
Are we going to stay on? Is it, or do I need to clip it? Okay.
Mm.
I understand. No,
Getting too old to be varnishing floors.
Oh, I want, is this, like where the pizza parlor is? Like, this is manufactured homes? That one goes out, curves and goes out to the highway.
yeah, that's those are the railroad tracks.
Oh, these are tracks.
Yeah, and this is the slip tracks.
Oh, okay.
30 minutes I was flat rate.
So it's this way.
Yes, Brian, if you send it to me, I can at least look at it when I get home.
I almost took your cup. Gotta watch me. I'm grabby.
Alrighty, everyone. Sorry for the delay. There's donuts, drinks in the fridge. Just help yourself throughout the meeting. Probably try to have a brief break, maybe in about an hour, and then continue on. I want to thank Aaron for coming today. I think we should maybe go around the room and introduce ourselves for those of us that haven't met yet before we kick today off, and then I'll turn it over to Aaron. So, Karen?
I'm Karen Solis. We've met.
Brian Parrish.
Janet Wade.
Marcus Hawks.
Rhonda Rice.
I'm Thatcher.
Oh, yeah.
Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
This kind of the agenda I made, but you can go however
Yeah,
you
so
want to go.
this is perfect.
Is the screen working?
Yeah, it's saying I'm plugged in, but it's saying no signal. I wonder if you need to do the on the remote.
Did you give this to me? Or is this yours?
I
Yes, but that one, I don't think it's one.
Is there something I need to?
No, watch that, please.
Yeah, Jamie, it must be mine.
Donut starts to spiral for me. Start with donuts and end with pizza. Terrible. I have no willpower.
Whenever I don't eat anything till like 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
All right.
Yes, I do. Kinda hoping you would, but I didn't want to say anything. Are we recording this?
Yes. We're live today just so we can track all of our comments and have a public process.
I'll turn my mic
If you're not talking, you can switch the mic off when it's on, it's green.
How does it work?
You talk into it, and there's a little bit of a speaker in here, but it's primarily for the live stream, so folks can hear it online.
So when you're not talking, just keep it off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can leave it clipped to you and leave it on, but if you set it on the table or something, turn it off. It creates quite a bit of staticky noise.
Okay. Are we good to go?
We're good.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Can you hear? Yes.
I don't memorize it to begin with.
And if it's okay with you all, I'm actually going to stand up. I spend a lot of time in the car, so when I can stand, it's great. And I'll alternate between probably standing and sitting as we're going through. But can you? Should I reposition this? Can you hear better now? Yeah. Okay. So as Thatcher said, my name is Erin Ebach, and I'm a land use planner, and I work with professional engineering consultants. This is the first workshop that we have scoped for you all to discuss the edits to the comprehensive plan. So the agenda for today is we are going to start off with a review of the scope of our work as well as a review of the process so you guys can understand what that's going to look like in the timeline. We will do a review of the role of a comprehensive plan, specifically the legal role. That's very important to you all as you are on the Planning Commission. You want to make sure that you have all the tools in your tool belt to make sure that you're making legally sound decisions when you have folks come in requesting zone changes and things of that nature. And then we are going to, the bulk of the meeting today is going to be a review of the goals that were provided to you all, and they're in your packets as well with the agenda for today that Thatcher sent out. I know that a lot of you received or sent comments, and I did receive those. Thank you very much. What is really helpful for me is I've read all of those, but for us to really talk some of those through. So it'll be a little, not super in the weeds, but I'm gonna put the goal language up on the screen, and we're gonna talk each of them through. And if you did have a comment on that specific goal, that would be a time to bring that up. That way your fellow commissioners could hear what your concerns are, and we could kind of talk through that. And then the last piece is going to be a discussion about future development. So we'll do some background and best practices. I'll provide you guys with some information before we get to the discussion about the future land use map in regard to why it's important, and just some best practices in regard to land use planning. And then lastly, we will wrap up with a mapping exercise. So the existing land use map that was provided to you all in advance of the meeting, I have printed out here. And the intent of that exercise is I have some different some markers and some different colored stickers. And I'm going to have you all go through and kind of mark on the map where you would like to see different types of development occur in the future, whether that's new development, redevelopment of certain properties, and the colors of the stickers indicate different land uses, and we'll talk about that when we get to that point. But that'll be a piece that's a little bit more interactive, and then ultimately that information I will take back with me, review all of my notes that are on the map, and then use that to develop a future land use map for you all that you can use when you're making your future land use decisions and you have cases come before the Planning Commission. So any questions on the agenda for today? Okay, so the scope of our work includes reviewing and making edits to the existing draft document that you all have, primarily for accuracy and clarity. So we have updated some of the demographic data that was put together just to make that a little bit more accurate and a little bit more timely, since a few years have passed since that was first pulled together. We've had another census, so we want to make sure that you've got all the most accurate information there. Updated, so we're working on updating the document formatting to be consistent throughout. And then we are updating the existing community profile and the formatting of that piece. So a community profile is going to be the demographic information, so things like kind of bulking that section of the plan up, so things like housing comparison, prices, general demographic trends like age of residents, some light population projections, things like that. Yes.
So will include housing then?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah, one comment I wanted to make about the consistent formatting issue is that some of the previous work, the levels of discussion or the level of the goals, I don't know quite what word to use here. Some things were high level, which should be in a comp plan, and then there were some things that were really in the weeds. And so we need to identify those ones in the weeds. We need to go work backwards to make sure that we have the high level goal there, identify what's missing and fill that in.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And with some of the goal language I've put together, I hope that was my intent, was really to achieve that kind of higher level piece. You guys went through a really valuable, and I'll get to this in a second, but I want to address this comment since it came up. You guys went through a really, really valuable process in putting together this draft, and you did community engagement, and you talked to folks, and you identified priority projects. I by no means want to lose any of that information. We need to keep all of that. We need to make sure that the strategies and the goals are reflecting that process, but we can do it in a way that the overarching goal is a little bit higher level, and then have reference to those priority projects in the strategies, and then also identifying the possibility of maybe moving some of those over, keeping a list of, if the city decides to go through with adopting a CIP, a capital improvements plan, keeping a list of those projects that can be moved over to that. So definitely, I think we're on the same page with how we want to make sure we handle those items. So following up on the scope, so we have also developed an existing land use map, and what that means is our staff and our team went through and we pulled up data from the city and the county, and we looked at every individual tax parcel within the city and looked at how it was taxed, and then the information we could glean from the aerial imagery, as well as looking at your existing zoning map to determine what the land use is currently on these parcels. And then that is what serves as the starting point for that future land use discussion, like I mentioned previously. We've also gone through and streamlined and organized the draft goals and implementation strategies. And then also within our scope, we have a Planning Commission workshop that we're at today to review the land use map and the goals. And then we will have a follow-up workshop to review the final plan with you all and discuss changes to that prior to adoption. And then the last thing that we like to do at PEC is we want to make sure that this plan is usable. It's not something that just gets put on a shelf. So for our comprehensive plan scopes, we always include a complimentary meeting 1 year out from adoption, where we come back out and we talk to you guys and see how is it working, are there any changes that need to be made, and kind of help you identify any areas that if things need to be updated and how things are going. Okay, so moving to the legal role of the comprehensive plan. This is by far, in my opinion, really one of the most important parts of this background information I have for you guys. So if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me. But first, so your authority to develop and adopt a comprehensive plan on behalf of the city of Herington is authorized by Kansas state statute. So if there's any concerns about why you're adopting the plan or if you're allowed to, it comes from the state. And all of these ultimately come from the same 1 or 2 state statute. So if a city has adopted zoning regulations, they are legally required to adopt a comprehensive plan that is in conformance with state law. And in Kansas, this is different in different states, but in Kansas, our state law is not incredibly specific on what needs to be included. There's not a line item list that says you have to have these exact things. It's more of some overarching kind of comments on things that the plan needs to address. But it's not like a checklist. Some states have it a little easier where it's very specific, the things they need to include. I always say the thing that's nice about the way the Kansas law is written is it allows us to tailor the plan to your needs. So if there's an element that maybe would be appropriate in another community, but you don't need it here, we're not including it just because the state requires it. However, one specific thing that the plan must address is an element in regard to the general location, extent, and relationship of the use of land. And the use of land. And the way that looks in practice is through the inclusion of a future land use map in your plan. And the reason why that piece is so important, again, I'll reiterate this, I know I've said it before, but when zone change or other applications come before you all, you have the golden factors that you'll look at, but also consistency with the future land use map should be a major consideration. And if someone, the Kansas Appeals Court has ruled that if someone is coming in and they're requesting something, a change, that does not match with what you all have decided is appropriate on the future land use map. So if you said a parcel is appropriate for a certain type of development, this individual is coming in and they're requesting a different type of development that's on this than what is designated on the future land use map. You can still approve that, but you need to say why. So you need to make a statement saying why you think it's in the public interest to allow this person to develop the property in this way instead of going with what's on the future land use map. But that's a new thing. There's been a couple of recent state court cases that have really solidified the role of the future land use map and the importance of that when you all are making decisions.
So the planning commission's duty is to review it when there's a zoning request or a land use request change, and then write a statement if it's in contradiction to it?
It doesn't need to be a formal written statement, but it should be something in the minutes. So if you are going to, for example, if someone is going to make a motion to approve and it's not in line with what's in the land use map, I would recommend that they, in their motion, just have some kind of statement afterwards so that it's in the minutes as to why they're recommending approval. It doesn't need to be anything.
Change conditions or,
I'm sorry?
whether it's like change conditions.
Yeah. So changing conditions, right? So this plan is intended to serve you all for 20 years. I would never recommend that you adopt something and let it sit for 20 years and don't make adjustments, but sometimes that does happen. And so it's very likely that the existing development around a certain area could change, and maybe, we try to get it right, but maybe things end up developing a little bit differently than what we thought they would. So definitely changing conditions would be a big one. Or just in general, maybe the use is something that is going to have a really large benefit to the public interest. And that would always kind of be the trump card in regard to kind of approving something that's not reflected on the future land use map.
So when you do your annual review of the comp plan, is that the time to make those adjustments to the land use map?
Yeah, that's what I would recommend is as you're doing your annual review, reading through goals, maybe you've completed some, so you can take them off the list, which is a great feeling. Just checking to see if you have had any substantial development, does that change the conditions on the future land use map? I think that's a really great time to review and kind of follow up with those action items afterwards.
So are you to reproduce the land use map then, like an updated version, and put it in the document?
So I wouldn't, you don't necessarily need to reproduce the land use map every year when you're reviewing. It would just be if you had a substantial enough kind of change in community conditions. But if any change in the document, if you do formally make an adopted edit, I would highly recommend that you add that into the online version or printed version so that it is available to the public.
And then do you do a major review every 3 to 5 years, or is it 5 to 7 years? Or?
It really depends on the community and their appetite for planning. There are some communities that really that actually don't let their plans go for their entire plan shelf life. So they would maybe say this is a plan for 20 years, but at the 10-year mark, we're going to entirely redo the plan. That's a kind of a policy and a political decision, in my opinion. You can let it sit for 20 years. You can decide, I want to adopt a new one at the 10-year mark. But I think your intent of whether or not you want it to last for 10 or 20 years or 5 years probably shapes, in my experience, how frequently communities do major edits. So if you're going to keep the same plan for 20 years, you're probably going to have more edits periodically, whereas if you're intending for the plan to only last for 10 years, you may have lesser updates because the plan life is a little bit shorter. Okay, so I think hopefully this will be the piece that you were all waiting for. So talking through the goals and strategies. I am going to just pull them up in a PDF version on the screen so we can kind of be on the same page. But I know you have copies in front of you as well. And it's very helpful that we're being recorded because I'll be able to go back and listen to your comments. But I am going to be just kind of taking notes as we talk through these things just to kind of get the general consensus of the group. But my notes will be on paper, so what will be on the screen will be static. So I'll get this pulled up real quick here.
I will say really quick, we have 17 goals to keep in mind here, and plus if we want to add anything else. So if we get too much over 10 or 15 minutes, we could rapidly run out of time. So I think if we make some substantial comments and we need to come back to it after or just move on from it temporarily, that might be our best bet for the sake of time. And everybody's busy and we want to try to keep this at 2 hours. So.
Yes, that's a great point. And the future land use discussion is very important. I definitely want us to at least have bare minimum 30 minutes for that. So it's a really big deal. So I want to make sure we have plenty of time to.
So if we move past the goal and you have more to comment, feel free afterwards to send an email to me. Today's not the end all be all. If we still have a couple more comments in the next week or two, I can get those to Aaron, or you can send those to Aaron directly, and we can address those in the final draft. So.
Would you mind touching the remote there? For some reason, when I switched to the PDF, it kicked me off the signal. Which, that's okay. I can see that screen, so if that's the way we have to do it, that's fine.
It's window.
Should be function F11. Well, you have to hit function F11.
What did I do?
So if you hit,
I think there we go, duplicate. Is that what we want?
yes.
Perfect.
Lord. Okay.
Thank you very much.
I don't know Windows 11.
The tech stuff is not my area of expertise, so I appreciate your patience with me. All right. So this language should be familiar to you all, but I do want to go over really quickly just the breakdown between what is a goal and what is a strategy and how they affect this language here. So, goals and strategies at the comprehensive plan level, they impact a very wide range of topics. And in addition to kind of creating a policy statement or a value statement about what the community wants to see on various topics, they also outline the steps needed to achieve those goals or to realize those values in the community. So our approach to comprehensive planning, and specifically goals, is PEC is very focused on actionable plans. So I want to get you guys something that you can use that is visionary and is looking to the future, but is also realistic and clearly kind of outlines those next steps that are required. So these goals, they are comprehensive in nature, and they consider both current initiatives and long-range planning initiatives. And because these goals were informed by public engagement and public participation, goal setting is an ongoing process. So as community priorities change, you always want to make sure that you're checking these goals and you do have that yearly review of the plan to make sure that these items here are reflecting what the community is wanting to see going forward. And with that, these goals may be revised as we make progress. Always feels great to check stuff off, but also they can change as local conditions change throughout the life of the plan. So goals are intended to be high-level, actionable statements about what a community wants to achieve. And then strategies are the actions or approaches to achieving that goal. So what needs to be done to get us to that point. And something that I want to point out that we touched on a little bit before, but these goals are written to be slightly less specific than what was included in the original draft. That doesn't mean that we can't add in layers of specificity at this point and kind of talk through if there are additional projects that we want to make sure are reflected here. But what is really important, again, is that these goals can serve you through the life of the plan. So I'll use this very first one as an example because I think it's kind of helps to frame this in usability of the plan. So this first goal here, the public safety, so providing efficient public safety and city services to maintain the health, safety, and welfare of residents. So a strategy that we have recommended for that is to establish fire stations concurrent with growth and accepted service standards. You'll notice that that language does not specify things like number of bays or number of apparatus that the community might need, because that could change. So I don't want to say that you have to develop a new fire station located in a certain place or with a certain level of capability, because your population could substantially change throughout the life of this plan, and you need to be able to have flexibility with that. So anything that is kind of specific in number, I want to make sure that we include it in a list of projects and things to consider for the CIP, but I would encourage you all to kind of have that framework in mind as we're talking through these goals. So kind of briefly talked about the first goal here, but So establish additional fire stations concurrent with growth and accepted service standards. Invest in a centralized station that can serve as a regional training facility with capacity for additional vehicles and equipment, and overnight accommodations for future staff or emergency needs in compliance with FEMA shelter certification requirements. And then very similar language for strategy 1.2, so establish police department facilities concurrent with growth and accepted service standards. Invest in the repair or replacement of a centralized station, and develop a committee to determine future facility needs and guide investments. And strategy 1.3 would be to collaborate with county public safety offices to upgrade the communication systems. And then strategy 1.4 is continue following the vehicle rotation schedule included in the capital improvement plan. So this was a goal that was in the draft, but I realize that you do not currently have an adopted capital improvements plan. So as part of this discussion, we're going to have to figure out how we want to handle those kinds of goals. If we want to leave them in because we think that that is something that's definitely going to happen, that's just fine. Or if we want to take those goals out and maybe a separate goal is just develop a capital improvements plan with these different things that we want to make sure that are included. So there's some different ways we can look at that.
We could add it, I mean, if we went back to the existing comp plan, they do have an action item that says we establish a capital improvement plan for all city infrastructure, street, water, sewer, electric, community.
So if you guys like that, then I think that would be a good way. We could take out some of these goals that reference the comp plan, and we could add like an appendices that says, you know, hey, I know that you have a goal that says you want to reestablish the capital improvements plan. In this appendices, here are some projects that came up during the comprehensive planning process that we want to make sure are included in that process. And that would be exactly like, you know, continuing the vehicle rotation schedule or those other items. How do we feel about that approach?
I agree.
Because otherwise, things are just sort of, it's just spread out through the plan, they're sort of hidden, you know, and we need to be focused when we do a capital improvement plan.
Yeah, and you guys have some really, really good information there. Like, you took the time to go out to the community and have these really serious discussions about what you want. So it's really important that we retain that. So that's a key goal of mine here.
I have a question about a couple of these things. One,
Yes.
the strategy 1.4 is vehicle rotation sort of in the weeds. I mean, we need to maintain appropriate and serviceable equipment that is vehicle rotation. Is that a little too in the weeds?
So typically that would be something that would be included more in a CIP, in a capital improvements plan, as opposed to a comprehensive plan. What we could do is, for under goal 1.1 and 1.2, it would be very easy to expand on that language and essentially say that, you know, I can kind of wordsmith this, but put in a line for both fire facilities and police facilities to say that, you know, you want to make sure that equipment and fire implements are serviced and maintained in accordance with industry standards or something to that effect. Is that kind of the route you're thinking? Maybe just add a sentence there.
Or could we replace 1.4 with language that talks about capital improvement, reestablishing a capital improvement plan?
Would that be appropriate under that section though?
I would recommend I would recommend we make that as a new goal. So just take out, if we're going to establish a goal to adopt a capital improvement plan, then I would want it to have a higher weight than a strategy. So I would recommend just kind of taking this one out, and then we would just add an additional goal.
Agreed.
I'd like to discuss with this group in strategy 1.1. We have a very ambitious fire chief, which is good. However, we have in here as a strategy a regional training facility. that's a nice thing to do, I'm not sure that that's a high priority to our community, unless can demonstrate how it serves us. Is it an economic development boost? Are we putting money towards a nice to do thing versus other items that are critical to the overall operation of our community? So, I'm not sure that that's, because this is in the first goal, it appears to be extremely important. And I personally don't place having a regional training facility that high on my priority list of everything that needs to be done in this town.
When we discussed this, we identified a new area for placement of this, but this is a function the fire department already does. So it would be expanding on a current thing that they already do. And I think when we talked about it, we also said it gives us a break in taxes and insurance.
Well, it's listed in the existing draft under the grid, city infrastructure. I mean, it's actually called out as one of the action items. Unless we're going to change the existing draft, take it out.
Well, what I would recommend is if the true priority is adding a goal of the CIP, then I think you make that goal number one. Quite frankly, instead of shifting that down to goal 17, just move everything down and make your number one goal establishing a CIP.
And I will say, I don't have these listed in priority order, so that's definitely something we'll want to discuss today. I have them listed in the order that when I was going through your existing draft, pulled them together. So, and kind of tried to group them by topic, but definitely reordering. Like if the CIP goal is number one, we want to make sure that this reflects that.
That makes sense. And just to kind of add, I have had discussions with the police chief about this a couple times. And like she said, that this is already something that they do on a regional basis, but they don't necessarily have the facilities for it. And Herington is pretty much the only fire department in the area that has capability, or at least the training to be able to do it.
I mean, we're the central region outside of Abilene, but we also serve Morris County and even like parts of Geary County and much of Dickinson County. So to an extent, we are kind of the regional location, other than Abilene, which their focus is kind of just Abilene.
And these regions also end up having to, pay funds in order to Herington in order to be able to do it. So it is a kind of revenue stream, but.
And aren't we the only ones that do water rescue training?
I think so, but I know this has been established as a high priority. I don't know if it has to be goal number one. I think we can discuss all that, but.
If you guys want to think on that one, like for that strategy, if you want to pull out the regional piece, or maybe that's something that you guys can think on and shoot me an email back. Just give me some guidance.
And would it be appropriate for that to put that into the CIP versus the document, the comprehensive document? This is a question for everyone.
The one thing I will say, it definitely could be. So, but the one difference that is important to note about a CIP as opposed to a comprehensive plan is that a CIP is going to have a little bit more teeth to it. So in your CIP, you're going to have, it's going to be a 5-year CIP, and you're going to say these are, the length of time you choose. This is what we want to complete in 5 years, and this is potentially how we're going to pay for it. So there does need to be, doesn't mean you don't have a list of projects, but you're waiting. A lot of communities have a list of, we want to do all these things, and we're going to cycle them into the CIP. But I do want to distinguish between a CIP and kind of that wish list, because generally you're going to identify funds, potential funds, for these things in your CIP. So yes, it could be in there if that's a policy decision that the council would make in their budget process.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to move to the next goal here. So this is a big one. To ensure public infrastructure is provided and maintained in a proactive manner. And there are a myriad of strategies under this piece. So we've got the improvements to the water treatment plant, a new softener system and clear well, replacement of raw water lines, improvements to the distribution system, as well as the completion of AMI deployment and the Walnut Street water line project. Implement facilities improvements to the wastewater treatment plant, complete phase 2 construction, complete upgrades with phase 3 improvements. Invest in improvements to the electric distribution system, purchase an additional 3 megawatt generator for emergency outage use. Complete AMI meter deployment for water and electric distribution systems. And then encourage renewable energy sources, expand city solar policy to add additional generation for residential and commercial use, expand city solar and wind footprint. I believe it's automatic metering implement? Is that?
Yeah, it's basically just our electronic read meters.
It makes it easier so that there's not a staff person that has to go out and read all of these.
Didn't we already do 2.4? Didn't the commission
Um,
authorize the purchase?
so we've already done part of 2.1. We've already improved the water treatment plant or replaced it. I don't know if we've installed a softener system, but that kind of seems a little in the weeds to me. But I think strategy 2.1 could be entirely just the replacement of the raw water line, because that's essentially our next biggest project outside of the sewer plant, which I'm not sure if the sewer plant is addressed later on.
It is.
It is? Okay.
What about the installed new clear well?
I'd have to ask Leo on that, but I'm not really.
Not sure about the software.
I don't think we have a softener system, unless it's a part of the new treatment plant. But we built a new water treatment plant, so.
And that raises the question of, concise and up-to-date discussion of existing conditions.
Mm-hmm. So, yes, I think that's a great point. Typically, so the strategies that we have here are, they are pulled from the draft. They are a little bit more specific than what I would typically write myself, because things like the water treatment plant, that's completed. So if you are planning to really monitor the plan pretty in depth and update these goals when you complete them, that's great. But you will, if you are going to be a little bit more specific in your language, just know that you could get to a point where all of the strategies under goal number 2 are completed. That's great, but it also doesn't mean that for the next 10 years of the plan you should stop investing in infrastructure. So that is a balance. Like, do you want a more overarching goal that says something like the kind of the base goal language? Do you want those strategies to be more broad or more specific?
Well, I mean, I guess the old plan broke it down in goal, objective, and then an action item, and then a benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's kind of a path. And here we have just a goal and basically a strategy or an action item almost. Could we add in, I mean, could you make the strategies more of like the objective that you want, like improve the water treatment, the city's water treatment, and then your action items to add would be more specifically that you can go back and check off.
We could definitely do it that way. That would be a decision for you all to make. With that, you would need to go in, and if new action items were needed, you would need to adopt those no differently than you would need to adopt new strategies.
You know, in this I don't know enough about the water treatment system to say, but, you know, we need to differentiate between must-haves and nice-to-haves. Like, okay, is raw water line definitely is a must-have. So is the clear well, is that a must-have? Is the softener system a must-have or a nice-to-have?
Those two, quite honestly, they seem like they're off in the weeds. I mean, it seems like we're getting too specific to me. We know we need a raw water line, so we need to invest in the partial or full replacement of the raw water line. I think the difficulty is if you add like a date to that, like when you add these hard line dates, I mean, you're bound to start breaking them. I mean, you're bound to start.
We're having a capital improvement plan that outlines the funding needs, and you can see what, from a funding standpoint, is a realistic schedule.
So
Then interweave the priorities.
I think if we make something that's so hard to follow, like the 2001 plan, we'll be back to square one where we didn't follow the plan at all. So I think a general approach to this plan is probably going to be a wiser decision, but that's just from the outside looking in.
And it's a hard balance, right? This is your plan. I want you to feel like this is in line with what the community is looking for and what they want. But I will also tell you from a professional recommendation standpoint, typically I recommend no more than 10 goals with 2 strategies each. So this is a lot that you are taking on compared to what I would recommend if we would have started this process from the very beginning. They could definitely be consolidated. So rather than having a specific statement about invest in improvements to the water treatment plant, install a new softener, clear well, replacement of raw water lines, I would recommend we have a strategy that says, you know, it's a little tough because you don't have the CIP completed yet, but some type of just value statement that says, you know, ensure that water treatment facilities maintain in a good, safe, effective state of repair for the community, and make updates in concurrence with, you know, industry standards and adopted plans and policies, kind of referencing the CIP without referencing it. That would be my recommendation. It also, you don't want to be so vague that people don't know what you're talking about, but you also want to make this easily implementable too. Like, Thatcher and your council have so many different goals coming at them all the time. And if you have a really specific goal that you say, well, we want to do this exact thing in 4 years, or 2 years, or whatever that might be, it can be really hard. You're kind of setting yourself up to get a lot of political pressure that you might not necessarily need.
You know, the next step after the conference is the implementation plan,
Right.
the action plan. And a lot of these details belong in an action plan.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to lose the individual items. They need to be, you know, kept.
And it doesn't have to necessarily have a date.
Right. I kind of like to do, if you all are amenable to this, so what I would recommend is once we talk about these language and I can go back and make the edits, I don't like to put a hard date like 4 years, but instead recommendations in regard to short-term, near-term, long-term. It's a little bit more broad, and that allows you to still prioritize without kind of being beholden to a very specific timeline.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, so if you are all in favor of kind of going that route of being a little bit more broad with these strategies, are we okay if I condense some of these strategies into that language like I mentioned?
Yes,
Okay, great.
100%. Being slightly more vague, some of this stuff would probably be.
Basically, we have, in goal 2, we have the water treatment, we have the wastewater treatment, we have the distribution of both. We have the electric and renewable resources. That's it. It shouldn't really get too in the weeds with our strategies until we get to like Janet said, it's the action plan.
Okay, great. I asked one quick question before we move on. I don't want to be the one holding us up, but do you have a current, it says expand city solar policy was in the text. Do you have an
Yes,
adopted
we do.
solar? Okay, awesome.
I'm sorry, what was the question? Solar?
Do we have a solar policy?
Yeah, I just wanted to
we
make
do.
sure
We
that,
have a really difficult, complex solar ordinance that is protective of our city's electricity.
oh, I see, okay.
That,
Well, it's modeled off a KMEA policy. I don't want to get into the weeds on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. I understand. I used to work for a city that had municipal electric. It's a
You
very
can't do
important
whatever
thing.
you want on
Yeah.
the policy.
Yeah, for sure. Just wanted to make sure you did have that adopted since it's in the text. Okay. So then goal number 3, maintain community facilities in a state of good repair, integrate new technologies, and invest in improvements that meet the service expectations of residents. So these just focus on community facilities here. We've got plan for facility improvements at City Hall that improve information access and enhance the customer experience. There is some additional language here, like for the contract management software, case tracking, and then modernizing capabilities for public meetings. I would say this goal could be very similar to the ones above, in that we could probably cut those next 2 sentences out and just make sure that the improvements at City Hall are occurring, that enhance the customer experience and kind of meet citizen standards.
Give the staff the tools they need to effectively, efficiently achieve their.
Perfect, yes. Yeah, yep. So I can kind of narrow that down, and then in that list of kind of projects that we'll pull together, I'll make sure I include those 2 pieces as well. So the next strategy here, develop a cemetery or master plan, assess future plot capacity, the condition of the cemetery building, other structures, and water use. Is that something that you all still are interested in, adopting the cemetery master plan?
I think it's an important thing to do.
Yeah.
In this category of community facilities, I think we need to look at it a little higher level, because our community facilities are our sidewalks, our streets, our parks, our the cemetery, all those public use facilities. And, we have separate goals for complete streets and other things, and recall where we talk about the parks at this point. But again, we need those community facilities that enhance quality of life for our residents, our attractions for visitors, that kind of goal. Our goals need to be aspirational.
Yeah.
And we've sort of gotten into the mundane. So I think, those within the community facilities, we can consolidate a lot of these other things and then make sure that we're including everything we need to include in there.
Yeah, I think that's great. I could do something, kind of maybe keep the strategy in about City Hall improvements, and then for the second strategy, 3.2, my initial thought would be to include some kind of language that said to invest and maintain community facilities in such a way that they promote a pride of place for residents and attract visitors, and maybe say including cemetery, parks, something like that, kind of hit on what you're looking for.
well, I know that we do get into all of that later. There's other goals that we're gonna get to. Maybe we can come back
to that. Okay, great. And actually, this next section will address some of that with like the sidewalks piece. So staying connected. Goal number 4: maintain, expand, and improve Herington's thoroughfare system to ensure community connectivity, safety, and access. So the first strategy is develop a master streets plan. Assess existing roadway conditions and necessary improvements that address safety and enhance connectivity. Consider updates to operational systems, drainage, floodplain management, bridges, culverts, and dams. And then identify and pursue funding to support the continuous and long-term maintenance of roadways, following the capital improvement plan for street and bridge improvements, continue utilizing the city's street assessment tool, and incorporating the 2006 sales tax fund. And then 4.3, complete Broadway street concrete rehabilitation and island lighting. I think this set of strategies, very similar to the ones above, can be condensed into some value statements and be a little bit less specific. For example, I know that in any street master's plan is going to assess roadway conditions, outline necessary improvements, and consider all of the things that are mentioned. So you don't maybe necessarily need to say that you're looking for that. You could just say develop a streets master plan for that one at least. And then for 4.2, where it says, continuing following the capital improvement plan, we'll probably, we'll want to take that part out since it's referencing something that would be in another goal. But then, what are our thoughts on this street assessment tool and the sales tax fund? Is that something we want to keep in?
Well, the sales tax fund, I would think would be, I don't know what its current status is, but that sort of fits into the CIP.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know what the street assessment tool is.
I mean, the problem that Herington's had in the past with developing master plans, we have several, is there's no really plan or procedure to follow those master plans, and there's certainly no budget to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you almost hamstring yourself a little bit when you say develop a streets master plan. I think following the capital improvement plan, I think that could all be removed, and more just identifying funding, budget mechanisms, or coordinating with a future CIP to improve roadways in the community. I know Broadway is probably in there because it's such a big goal for this community, so I think they felt like it warranted that. But I think you should. I think Broadway Street could be broken out into its own goal almost. I mean, walkability.
Downtown. I hate to use the word downtown revitalization should be one of our big goals.
So do you think it makes sense to maybe move that piece, because we do have a section that talks about, that specifically references downtown and kind of placemaking, maybe moving that there, or its own separate goal just about Broadway?
I mean, it could be moved even in the walkability section to an extent too, I think, because making it walkable would probably include replacing the street, rehabilitating the street.
So, Aaron, I have a question for you. Is it appropriate for the comprehensive plan to identify missing plans? Like, a goal would be to create a street master plan, to create a bridge master plan, to create those sort of things. Is it appropriate for us to recommend the development of those?
That's a great question. So it can be, if it's something that you really want to do as a community, but I wouldn't put it in unless you think it's something that is high priority and is achievable. It's common. One that's gained a lot of popularity is like adopting a complete streets policy or a complete streets plan, kind of promoting sidewalks and streetscaping. So I've seen a lot of communities add that to their comp plans.
Actually, Herington has one, but it was tailored, taken from Wichita or someplace, and it's long and complicated and doesn't really fit our community.
Okay.
But yeah, it's that sort of thing. Is that gets down into a complete streets plan, at least in my understanding. It gives you more detail and goals for what you're wanting to accomplish, and then the separate thing is sort of the implementation plan, the action plan. So, I mean, the complete street thing needs to be revisited. I doubt most people even know it exists.
I know.
Yeah.
It's not on the website, let's just put it that way.
So So that's something we can look at for sure. But does that answer your question? It can be appropriate, but really it needs to be a goal,
You
a big goal.
created all of these off of the existing draft plan, and it's pretty itemized in the existing draft plan under the grid. But what the committee was, what the planning commission was trying to achieve, which was basically just a better street system
Mm-hmm.
and to plan for the replacement. Like these were complete, sidewalks, gutters,
Yeah.
the whole shebang. So, I guess you go back to the original, committee to say, was that the goal of the planning commission to make a goal to, assess the streets and make sure the streets, the gutters, sidewalks, the whole street
Mhm.
trees, the whole thing, was that the goal of the commission to have that in the comprehensive plan? Because it's mentioned quite a bit
Yeah.
in detail.
And I would say ultimately, I wasn't there for those initial conversations, so I would refer to you all. I mean, that's a kind of a
Yeah.
policy decision you
Well,
need to
some of
make.
these things were sort of cobbled together because there were discussions that the planning commission had, and then there were elements that were inserted that came from city staff, and they didn't necessarily mesh in content or in, a lot of the stuff from city staff was in the weeds.
Well, I would say that from what I've read from like citizen input, what I've read in the 2001 comp plan, what you read in the Herington tomorrow, is it was very important. The streets were, and they should be, along with, all the other infrastructure, that was the goal of let's help keep the street system up and running, and it's the street system.
Yeah.
So I would say that we still want to have that as a goal. Maybe not get down in the weeds with exactly what, but, if we're allowed to say, well, it would be a good idea to create some type of street system master plan.
I think that's fine to leave in, especially if that kind of provides you a mechanism to say this is a priority of the community, we want to make sure it happens, but we don't necessarily want to hold ourselves to what specific projects need to occur, because a master plan, so a difference between a comprehensive plan and a master plan is a master plan is going to have maps, they're going to assess the roads, and they're going to literally, map each road and say, this is what needs to happen here. It's very specific, this needs a mill and overlay, this needs maybe expansion.
I mean, that level of detail is what's going to be needed to actually build a capital improvement plan.
Yeah, that's also true. So maybe we adjust this to still keep the goal of developing the streets master plan, and then, keep the strategy of developing the streets master plan, but maybe streamline the rest of the language, both in 4.1 and 4.2. So basically say, develop a streets master plan,
You can wordsmith.
yeah, and then section 2, identify and pursue funding to support the continuous and long-term maintenance of roadways, and just kind of cut it off there and not be as specific, so you guys have some flexibility. Okay, I am going to give us a quick time check. So it's 11:08 right now. We're on goal 5 out of 18. So, and part of that is me. I know I'm asking in-depth questions. So I'll try to go a little quicker for us here.
Well, I think going forward, we can kind of say that just about everything we have in here is way too detailed.
Yeah.
It needs to be combined at a high level.
I think 4 and 5 could be merged. Could 4 and 5 be merged, and then
Yeah, definitely.
potentially even 6? I mean,
Yeah, the whole, everything related to the transportation infrastructure, I would think should be merged.
I mean,
Yeah, 'cause
goals
sidewalks,
4 through
bike
7,
trails,
honestly.
transportation goals,
Mm-hmm.
the funding of regional and state federal. All of that is just under the umbrella of
Okay, if you're okay with that, that would be what my recommendation would be, to really,
Yeah, we
Yeah.
want to use your experience and expertise.
I did have
Yes, I do.
if we're gonna zip on through goal 5 with the let's combine it
Mhm.
and goal 6, I did have, one thing I did see missing out of the strategy language was maybe a extensive sidewalk maintenance program, and maybe that's too vague. Because it's mentioned over and over again that sidewalks are an issue in Herington.
I think that gets into goal 6, right?
That's what I have down
Yeah.
as goal 6. And it's more of an action item, not a, I mean, I think it's in the priority or the strategy,
Mhm.
but it's not specific. Especially as much as people complain about it. Me being one of them.
So if we merge goals, maybe 4 and 5 and part of 6, we could keep a portion of 6 called out if sidewalks are a really big priority of the community. And maybe kind of streamline. Well, I like strategy 6.1 and 6.2 being separate because one references the trail, but maybe we add the site, like something about looking into long-term maintenance and funding for improvements of sidewalks under strategy 6.1.
Well, maybe it's just covered under a statement like the street system.
And that's great too, if we want to cover it that way. If you think it needs to be called out because the community is looking for that, we can do that. But if you think it's fair to put it under street system, that's okay too.
Like just for wordsmithing a street and sidewalk system
Well,
to kind of point them out specifically.
a street system includes your gutters, sidewalks, signage, trees, surface.
I guess it's more just a highlight, as if that's more of a focus as well as for the sidewalks. Because yeah, I mean it's included, but you just adding that verbiage there. But
I think what Erin's saying there, she wants to keep 6, strategy goal and strategy 6, it gets down, you really get down into it where it's just an action item. I thought was more, it's more of an action item that I'm looking at.
okay.
Would wayfinding just be better in goal 6 and strategy for goal 6?
Look what section do I have wayfinding under right now? Is it 13? Yeah, 13.
So it's already 13, right?
Yes. So under the unique identity section, there's a goal about placemaking.
Okay.
And I have the wayfinding piece there. Okay. So if we are good with the transportation goals, let's talk about the housing ones next. I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk those through because they are very important. On page 5. So the overarching goal statement, the first one is encourage the availability of housing for all ages and income groups. And then there are the 4 strategies there that address different items that lend themselves to that. The first one would be promote a mixture of housing types, ensure the future land use map and zoning regulations provide opportunities for different types of housing, promote residential development in alternatives, encourage infill development through adaptive reuse, brownfield redevelopment, repurposing of existing residential units, encouraging the development of second-story residential downtown lofts. Update the zoning, or 8.3, update the zoning regulations to allow smaller lot sizes in residential zoning districts consistent with the future land use map. And then update the zoning regulations to address accessory dwelling units in residential zoning districts. So this, sorry, go ahead. Personally, I think that strategy 8.1 and 8.2 would already be strategy statements you could point to that would say you should encourage or allow ADUs. Because typically ADUs are considered a residential development alternative. So it could fit both under 8.2 and mixture of housing types.
Infill, I think, is a real critical focus for us because we have this infrastructure for 5,000 people and we only have 2,000. And so developing new housing developments is, on new land is really should not be our goal. We need to infill and so that we have the tax base to maintain our current infrastructure and utilize that current infrastructure. So I just want to emphasize infill.
Do you feel like the goal number or the strategy 8.2, does that hit on that enough, or do we need to call that out further?
Well, unless you understand that the issue of utilizing and financially supporting our current infrastructure, you won't understand this.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you can add some verbiage in why you want to encourage
Yeah,
infill.
definitely. So one of the things that we are doing is, and there was a comment about how in these goals I referenced the growth, I think it's growth and development chapter, and how that doesn't currently exist. That's because that's one of the areas that I've identified that I think the existing draft is lacking. So that is something that is addressed in that piece. So the growth and development chapter focuses on the future land use map, and also directly kind of talking about the benefits or the costs for different types of development. So if we feel like infill is something we really want to hit on, I can make sure that we go into kind of a deep discussion of that during that section.
There are portions of town where there's a whole lot of empty lots that have infrastructure and they're not being utilized.
There's something in verbiage we should put in there about like knocking down some of the dilapidated, however you say that word.
I think
that's
that's
already being done.
I think that's addressed later on in the plan.
But doing something to prevent, and I don't remember how well we touch on this, but we spend money to tear down buildings. We're not spending any money to salvage what we have. And
I think that's where we talk about promoting. It is in here, promoting maybe not using the word promoting, but it's the neighborhood revitalization plan. It is mentioned.
Yeah.
And also the land
at
bank,
one time,
creating a land bank.
we talked about
to
land
do
bank
that.
and things like that, but
And since we are trying to zoom through these here so we can get to the next piece, let me jump to that section so we can just kind of talk about that.
So it's in
17, is it?
Strategy 8.2, I tied it into the grid, goal 1, city infrastructure, action items 1, 4, and 1, 5, determine the best use for vacant lots and for dilapidated properties. And then it got real specific, clean up 2 properties a year, but it is mentioned in the grid.
Okay.
And
And I have an 8.2 the encourage infill development, through adaptive reuse, brownfield redevelopment, and repurposing. And then we've got, where is that section at? Under 17, there's the goal: protect neighborhoods from decay, decline, and disinvestment, and encourage the revitalization and preservation of legacy buildings and historic areas. And it goes on to talk about keeping Herington clean and well-maintained in one of the strategies, continuing to invest in nuisance abatement, and to continue to work with property owners to bring problem properties into compliance. 17.2, encourage neighborhood stabilization and revitalization strategies, so continuing to support residents and property owners in neighborhoods showing signs of distress, and explore programs aimed at home repair and revitalization, and then establish a land bank to bring vacant or condemned properties back into productive use. If we wanted to add a section about the NRP program, or I'm sorry, a strategy about the NRP program, we could add it, we could address it in that section.
Yeah, that's where I have it listed.
Okay.
Would it make sense to consolidate, or at least put next to each other, these issues about housing and neighborhoods?
Yeah, we can definitely move like the reinvestment and redevelopment section to come after.
It's because it's in the same section in Herington Farm. It's in
Yeah.
our neighborhood.
So after like quality housing choices, I could move that there, and it would kind of
Yeah.
pull that in. And I guess that's another question I would have for you all, is we need to talk a little bit about how I don't have these prioritized. So goal number 10 is not the 10th priority.
Yeah.
So the way that I like to do this is you'll have each section of the plan that will talk about the individual goals that relate to that section. But then at the end, the very end of the plan, I like to put together like a chart that shows you all of your goals, so that you do have, because I know when I was on the other side of this and I was using a comprehensive plan every day to look at development, it was very annoying to have to flip through the book. So I'll put together kind of a list at the end that has all of the goals together. With that though, do you want that to coincide with the chapter arrangement, or do you want that to be prioritized? Like in the numbering system.
We might not be able to answer that question.
I think we
That's
can.
okay.
I think we can. I don't know if we need to abandon the chapters. I think we could do that, right? Or no?
Well, not yet. I don't think we're at that stage where it's,
Okay.
when it's all, when you have it all put together and
Mhm.
we've got it all condensed, then we can figure out how it needs to flow together.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Then you can look at it and make that
And
decision
I
at
think
that
we
point.
should at least attempt prioritization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Not yet.
We can save that for the next time. Okay, so approximately 8 minutes left here. Are there any specific goals?
I'd like to chime in. I think 9 should just be removed. I think it's far too broad for staff to be able to follow. So, I mean, it sounds nice,
Yeah.
but then, the strategy doesn't even really reference the goal, in my opinion. Maybe I'm missing something, and it just doesn't really. It's so broad that it doesn't give staff a process at all. I mean, again, it sounds nice, but I don't know if that could be merged into a different section or.
Yeah, that's.
Well, and that, I mean, it sort of goes with the neighborhoods and other stuff. It can easily be, at least be consolidated. Actually, I think that's probably more of a zoning reg issue.
Right, so.
And we've already had some discussions about, and done some revision of our zoning regs to encourage, to allow more neighborhood businesses things.
We think we could just take that one out then? Is that okay?
It's sort of in the weeds.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like a vision statement, honestly.
Well, in the Herington tomorrow, the goal was encourage creative economic opportunities in our neighborhood. And then it listed a couple of different things. But yeah, it's where it heavily references zoning.
Right.
Well, neighborhoods serving commercial uses. I mean, that's usually a issue in bigger communities. You don't need a grocery store on the west side of town.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's, what do you mean by neighborhood serving?
Yeah, and neighborhood
know.
serving, it's one of those terms that, like, I wish there was a better phrase for it, because it's something that planners say a lot, but to the general public, it doesn't really make any sense, in my opinion. So, you know, things like ice cream shops or like a little, I don't know, a cafe you'd walk to. But I get your point. Like in a smaller community, your downtown is walkable, right? You could easily walk downtown and go get an ice cream cone or go to the grocery store. So
if we have better sidewalks, then that'll facilitate.
exactly, yeah. So if there's greater connectivity, I don't know that you need this goal. In a larger community, maybe they have a need for that because they have just a larger land mass. But if you're okay with it, we can just take that one out. Is there anything else that we specifically want to make sure we have time to talk about today before we move on to the future land use in regards to the goals?
Well, one of the things I think we need to keep in mind, and I don't know where to put it in here, is developing our tax base. You know, we have a lot of things we need to do, and a lot of the elements in here will go towards developing that tax base, but I think that's something that we need to have in the forefront of our mind. You know, what kinds of things develop that tax base, because we need that tax base to do our capital improvements.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I'm going to put that, but
I mean, I think there could be an expansive, or at least a section on economic development that includes, you know, local commercial Main Street growth, but also growth of industry on the.
well, and tax base is not just commercial and industry, but you grow your tax base by infill. You grow your tax base by improving your infrastructure in neighborhoods that increases property values. You know, there's all those elements that go towards increasing your tax base, and maybe that's a discussion elsewhere, but I think it's one that we need to have a direct discussion about developing a tax base, because it's not just people talk about, oh, we don't want to increase taxes. Well, you still need the revenue for operations and growth. So, you know, other than just increasing the tax rate, you increase the tax base.
So we could think, like as Thatcher said, there are some strategies in here that talk about economic viability, some things about downtown. I think it could be helpful to maybe add a goal about economic development, and then maybe wrap some of those pieces into that. Does that kind of align with what you're thinking?
Would that fit in with goal 15?
That's what, yeah, that's what I'm looking at right now.
Economic development goal, do we?
So, are we going to have time to work our way through the rest of the goals? We have 10, 11, 12, 18, 14, 15, 16, we did 17, so, and then 18. We really made it through 5 of them, and we're switching gears now, looking at the land use.
Well, we were at 9. If we could run to 10 really quick.
So I guess I'm not sure. I know we want to keep this at 2 hours.
Well, we just
I
gotta.
don't know what's on your
We gotta
agenda.
make some comments, and we gotta move on.
Yeah.
Is what we gotta do. So
Well,
if
you
anybody,
wanna-
you know, if we have comments on goal 10, then let's do it and let's keep moving.
To use the concepts that we've discussed for the other goals about consolidating and levels and go to the next, you know.
So I can definitely do that if you all are comfortable with me just going through and consolidate, and then I can get you all a draft of when you're reviewing the final. if there are things that I consolidated too much or maybe not enough, then I can adjust at that time. Would that be appropriate?
So to me, the other big thing besides tech base is getting ready for the trail.
Okay.
And that, I mean, that's in here in several places, but, I mean, that's the one thing that will have a huge impact on the community and the city, and I think we need to address it straight on and really look at that, not in a broken up way, but in a concise way.
Under number 10, there is a strategy number 10. So under goal number 10, there's strategy number 10. And it talks about the trail system. And then I believe, and I'll have to go back and check, but I believe under the kind of the downtown area, there's a reference to utilizing the trail as well, or attracting visitors from the trail. So are you wanting that to be maybe like its own goal, or for the trail piece?
I'm sorry?
For the trail, for the strategy about the trail, are you saying that you would rather have that be a goal with a little bit more detail, or?
Well, you know, that's the most important community development thing that's going to happen to this town, and I think we don't want to hide it in little places.
Yeah. So then maybe
could that go into goal 11? Since we're addressing the lake and reservoir master plan, could we put trails after that?
Well, it's in strategy 10.2.
I would just make it its own goal. I think Janet's right. It's a big enough initiative that it should warrant its own goal. 11 and 12 seem like they could go together, quite frankly. I mean,
and actually 12 is something that I wanted to ask about. So if you're going to say explore options to incentivize the use of sustainable infrastructure, the street trees is easy. That's more straightforward, but I guess I want to make sure that this group is all on board with keeping that in, or that's something you want to go with.
Let's let it go with that whole street system thing, the green infrastructure, impervious surfaces, and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely could. It was called out specifically, but I don't necessarily know that it needs to be. And while I do think that like environmental goals are really important, I also know I don't want you guys to limit yourselves into saying you might adopt. I don't know. There might be more discussions that need to be had about that with your building official and things if you were proposing adopting some big change.
I mean, I don't know what green infrastructure is really. I mean, that's a super broad term.
Yeah.
So I think modernizing our infrastructure in general will make it more green, which we're already starting to do, but.
So maybe we take out strategy 12.1, take out goal 12, actually in general, and then move strategy 12.2 under goal 11. So under conserve and enhance Herington's environmental and natural resources, just address the tree canopy under that section. I think that's an appropriate kind of combination of.
That we're combining goal 11 with goal 10. And we're taking strategy 10.2 and creating a trail goal out of it.
So I have the 10.2 should be a trail goal.
Goal 11 goes in with goal 10. No? Because it's all about
That's up to you. Do you want to
healthy
combine them?
lifestyle and master parks plans and recreation.
We can combine, that would effectively, we could combine 11, 12, 11, and 10, and kind of parse some of that down and then make a new goal for the trail.
And then you're taking 12.2, strategy 12.2 and merging it in there.
Right, yeah, so basically eliminating goal 12, combining 10 and 11, and then moving 12.1 into 10 and 11.
are you gonna take the idea of green infrastructure, forget pervious surfaces, and merge it into like a street system one that we had in previous goal?
I feel like green infrastructure is addressed back in the renewable energy section. Are we talking about different things?
That's why I don't necessarily love that phrasing, because I think it's really, really broad. So like we talk about investment in solar and wind, we talk about, improving streets, we talk about enhancing the street canopy. I think we cover green infrastructure. Yeah. We've also talked about, maintaining the reservoir in the lakes, or in the lake. I don't know that you need to address it specifically, because I think it's covered in those other places.
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with you using your judgment in consolidating things. One thing, goal number 16, lifelong learning, it's nice and it's important, but I don't see the need to have that in here as a goal. We're not addressing healthcare, we're not addressing these other kinds of issues, so
I think that's just fine. I don't. I tend to get a little nervous when we have goals that are about somebody else's jurisdiction. So I would not be opposed to just removing that, unless you think it's important to the community and it needs to be included. But the school district does their own strategic planning, and I think we should let the experts do what they do best.
So remove 16.
So, how about 13 and 14, and then we'll be done. A minute or two on each.
I like 13. I mean, it kind of has its place in a comp plan. It's that, what do we want our community to look like? And 14 is.
I think 14 could be almost merged into like a planning and zoning section, right?
Well, I thought we took out the zoning and just
I mean, or place other planning and zoning initiatives with that. I don't know. Make the goal more broad, and
I think we could definitely. Are there other? So we had talked about taking out one of the goals that had referenced a code update or a zoning regulation update in 9.
Was all about zoning regulations.
Do we want to just have a goal that is separate, that just addresses regulations? So maybe take 14 and reword that to, I don't know, to better address needed code updates or standards.
I think update planning and zoning standards and regulations. I mean, after all, that is what this body is here for. So I think that's a pretty crucial point of the comprehensive plan, and I think you peel out those 3 or 4 other places in these goals and strategies where we address zoning regulations or updates to codes, and you place those in a single section.
So one zoning section, and you can do 13, 14, and 15 all in one. Aren't they all kind of
sort
the same?
of, and then there's some other strategies throughout everything
that address that.
Could be in that
15 and
section.
13 can be consolidated.
Yeah.
Yep.
Take 9 and 14.
All right. There you go.
Kind of here's how it looks, and then this is how the rules work.
So Erin will work her magic, and we'll bring something back before the second workshop.
What about 18? Plan strategic investment in future, in Herington's future. Is this where we're doing the
I would recommend that we take, unless you're really beholden to any of these strategies, I would recommend maybe just replacing them with the CIP strategy.
18 should go into the CI.
Yeah.
Merge it all. It's so broad. I mean, so broad and so specific at the same time. But
Yeah. Okay. All right. So we're going to switch gears here. I'm going to go really, really quickly through this because it's important that we can get to this
Well,
exercise.
just reference, everyone should have a copy of the 2001 proposed land use. Janet had a copy of it, I made a copy for everybody. So this is my personal opinion, we should, I know that you've done your homework, and you've gone back and looked at each and every piece of property, basically. But really, I mean, we're supposed to be also considering this.
Mhm.
So if we've erred in any way, it'd be nice to figure that out.
Yeah, and so one thing that's really important to note is these are existing conditions. What you have in your future land use map that was adopted in the previous plan, those were aspirational land uses for the future. It doesn't necessarily mean that they materialized. So I am by no means saying that what is currently existing needs to be what you put in the future land use map. You guys have gone through the process previously, and things obviously have changed. We want to make updates, but the previous efforts of identifying your desired development pattern should not go to waste, and we should consider that. But this is a existing condition, so we shouldn't be limited by this.
Tell me what the black means.
Let me get there real quick. Let me open this
Is that
up.
right away?
Oh, some of it's railroad property.
So that is
Seems
going to
like
be
it's a
vacant,
mix of stuff.
vacant or undeveloped land.
Yeah.
Some of this also could be land that potentially at one time has a structure or structure that
Okay, so
is
it's gray.
in the floodplain.
It's the gray on the,
Yeah.
Yes,
on the
that's
legend.
gray. Yeah.
Yeah.
The gray matches the black.
Yes.
And
Okay.
So, I do have a question, Lime Creek runs through town.
Mm-hmm.
Who owns Lime Creek?
So it depends. Is it like the floodplain that runs through town?
No, it's just Lime Creek. I don't know about the floodplain.
Yeah, basically it's floodplain.
It's floodplain. So what I have noticed in looking at your parcel data is it appears that there was, and this is very common in a lot of older communities, but that there were homes built in the floodplain back probably in the early 1900s. And then the pattern that I saw that you can kind of see here is that over time it appears that the city has been purchasing some of those parcels when they come up for sale, ultimately to discourage folks from building their home in an area where it might not be the best place to do so. I don't know, I think that aligns with what you're referencing.
Is that the state fund? Or
The city.
The city.
In some places,
Somehow
not
acquired
everywhere. But you can see where that vacant land is denoted, that kind of weird, almost L shape, that calls that out. But so I want to get to this really quickly, so I'm going to call you back to the presentation, and then we'll start the exercise, and I'm glad to answer any questions you have then. But real quick, so want to make sure we're talking about land use right now. We are not talking about zoning. So we looked at the zoning to see how that compared, but this refers to what is actually currently happening on that parcel right now. Land use and zoning are two different things, and they have different legal significance. So land use refers to the use, whether that's a dwelling, a convenience store, an automotive repair shop, and then the development types, the residential development, commercial development, industrial development of a property. And all of, you need different land uses within a community to make a complete community. If you have just residential, no businesses in your community, that's not going to work. If you have some communities that have really heavy commercial and industrial, nowhere to live, that also doesn't work. Zoning specifically defines and regulates the land uses that are allowed in different areas and on different parcels. And in some cases, you could take this map and you would look at your city's zoning map and you would notice that the parcel's land use might conflict with what is permitted in zoning. These are called legal non-conforming uses. A lot of folks think of this like when you refer to something that was grandfathered in, a use that was put into place prior to the adoption of these regulations. Some of that does exist here, so I just want to make that clear. Because folks usually like to look at these maps and be like, wait a minute, I know that my neighbor has this thing that doesn't fit with the regs, and often it could be because it's been grandfathered in.
Good question. We have that's next to the agricultural. Would that fall under that we were talking about, the zone change that's been proposed for the people who are trying to buy the house over there?
Agriculture versus
Residential.
Residential, so that would fall under what she was talking about there. Okay.
That land is actually currently zoned as
Industrial.
industrial. And this is where, when we're talking about zoning, I suspect that was zoned as industrial because it's adjacent to railroad property. And so if you're looking at expanding industry that needs to have a spur to the railroad, that was reserved for industrial for that potential kind of development. And those are the kinds of things we need to keep in mind. You know, okay, maybe now it's agricultural, but
Yeah, and those are some of the items I'm going to touch on really quickly before we get to the exercise. So in general, development should occur along a continuum and a scale of uses. So you're going to have centers like your downtown, and maybe more commercial uses are appropriate there. And as you move outside of those centers of activity, like downtown, you should see a decrease in the scale of development and a decrease in the intensity of the development. So you're going to see, as you move outside of these centers of activity, you're going to see more residential, and that residential is generally going to be, duplexes and maybe some mixed and single-family homes, and maybe some triplexes and fourplexes are more appropriate closer to a downtown area. And as you move outward from the city, to make sure that your development pattern is sustainable and you're using infrastructure appropriately, then you get a lessening of uses. Out here, you might have more single-family homes, and then on the outskirts of town, you might have rural residential and ag uses, and generally those are going to be served by on-site water and sewer, and it would not be a good idea to extend infrastructure in those areas because of cost. So just that is a really important thing to keep in mind. You guys know what the future land use is. So this map that we're going to look at here, I'm going to move my stuff and put it out on the table, and just for your purposes, those are the categories. You'll see there's a legend here, but it's the same legend that you have in front of you. It's just a big version. Okay, so I'm going to move out of the way, and we're going to have I guess we can do this two ways. Since you all have a copy of this in front of you, we can talk them through, and you can look at your small copy if you can see that, or I can move my things, and we can look at the large copy of the map here. What works best for you all?
I'd like to look at the large copy.
Okay.
Do we just start asking questions there?
So I have questions for you all that will kind of help you guide what you have to say and what I write down. But if you have specific things that you want to make sure you're addressing, go for it.
The Flint Hills Trail, shouldn't that be a parks and recreation zone all the way into town to Alana Creek?
I would say yes. So if that's something that you want to designate on the future land use map because you want to make sure that happens, I would let's denote that on the map so that I have that information. All of this is really important. Anything you see, like this needs to be that, I want to make sure I get that down. I've got Sharpies. You can write on these copies, or you can write on your own copy, whatever is most comfortable for you. So initial things like that come to mind, like, have you thought of this, is really, really important. But also just kind of talking through things to think about. The first one here being, and I'll move out of the way and just kind of make notes, is residential development. So you can see on the screen, thinking about where residential development or redevelopment should occur, and then where different housing types would be appropriate. So you can use those Sharpies, and you can literally, draw on this, write residential here, single family here, whatever whatever you think is appropriate, based on the existing land use pattern and,
Is it
and of course-
necessary to have like the 3 different types of residential, or could that be condensed to just single family and multifamily?
you can just condense it to single family and multifamily, that's fine. If,
In one of our goals, we talked about, a variety.
mhm,
And when we get to zoning, I think that's something we'll want to address is, why limit, area to single-family housing when we actually have, historical, residential structures that have been here for 100 years that are duplexes in single-family. And, I'm sorry, they don't disrupt the neighborhood. I think the whole single-family, multifamily to a great extent is an unnecessary restriction. Now, do you want to put a 40-unit apartment building in the middle of a, where there's a bunch of one-story bungalows? No.
So what I will say is when we are producing the future land use map for you all, we utilize what's called a place type framework. So I'm not going to go through and say this specific parcel needs to be single family only. I'm going to say this area should be residential in nature, and it should be maybe at a lesser scale. It should be predominantly single family with maybe a few mixed duplexes or 2plexes or 3plexes. But if you do have a duplex or a triplex, it should be this way in regard to form, so making sure it's consistent. So this is to give us a starting point, but I guess I will say I'm not focused only on use. What I'm going to give you is not going to say this needs to be built here. It's going to say these are some different things you can build here, but in this area, if you are going to build multifamily, so you want maybe let's say in this area a duplex or a triplex is appropriate, a 250-unit apartment complex not appropriate. That's the framework that I will be providing to you all. So I guess keep that in mind. So I heard infill was important. So if you want to mark on the downtown area or areas you think are appropriate for infill, that's
Any empty lots.
yeah.
Basically, the west side probably has the greatest
Oh, your microphone is.
Oh,
number of.
thank you. I forgot about my tail here.
So there's really could use some infill.
Okay.
This area over here has some empty lots.
Okay.
Unfortunately, what we've allowed to happen in some cases is you have an empty lot and you let somebody just build a garage there. And where a home would be more appropriate from a neighborhood and a tax base standpoint.
So is there a way to say that you only can have residential versus any kind of accessory structure?
There is. So a lot of cities in their zoning regulations state that all parcels must have a principal structure before you can construct an accessory structure, which effectively in a residential area prohibits a standing garage without a house.
But there's some of these.
But that's a.
Some of these have very short lots. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some lots. Well, I know the house that got burnt down a few years ago across the street from my mother-in-law. You couldn't build a house.
So this area, you said, this area in here is infill. Infill's a priority. Was it over here?
Yeah, like I live there, and like this house, the house across the street, these two. But yeah, I would say definitely there's a few others that are up in here as well that look like they're
Okay.
it's like some
It's gonna do.
Well, and you really need to superimpose the floodplains on here.
Because I actually think my house is in a floodplain right here.
I believe that the floodplain goes, like you can see the scarring.
Well, and I think part of it.
It kind of,
goes through
and I think
here.
it turns up a little bit, so you can kind of see it. But
And because this park, if I know what I'm looking at, This is the city-owned thing, and there's a swell through there.
Okay.
It's not really a park, it's just, it's open space.
Okay. Okay.
It'd be, I mean, developing it a
No,
park
yeah,
might be nice, it's green space,
Okay.
but,
Would you mind showing me the trail area?
so this,
Okay. I want to make sure that we get that noted.
it's the, you can check the,
I can look on
yeah.
the map, but it's just helpful to have it
yeah,
here too.
it's this whole rail area until, and
Because it goes out
ends,
over here, right?
no, it
or-
ends, where's the overpass?
I'm trying to find that earlier.
Okay. Realistically, it'll end here,
Mhm.
but the property actually goes a little bit over in here.
Okay. So
You can see it on the,
Mhm.
the, county website, the land use, it's under like the Kansas Horse Association or something.
Okay.
They have various, things still on the, the property maps, but it's actually now owned all by Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, but
Okay.
you'll see it as the
Yeah, I can pull it that way.
Hansa or,
Perfect.
the other area I'm concerned about is down here,
Mhm.
because you have this as or as institutional,
Mhm.
and it's sort of public use recreational institutional. I mean, this is a church,
Mhm.
okay, so that's sort of separate. But this is open space. I think is available for parkland.
Mhm.
You know, our fair occurs in this area, is set up in these empty spots. The community building is, to me, a recreational, sort of fits into that recreational category.
Okay.
So I think this needs to be refined.
So this could kind of be divided, this church property, and then this could be Parks and Rec.
Got the police and fire.
You have the police and
Yeah,
fire.
so something like that.
Because this is the police station.
Mhm.
This is a community building, which I consider recreational.
And then the fire station's right there.
And, well, the fire station's in the police station right now. They want to put the fire station over here, where it doesn't belong, in the middle of a recreation area.
And those are things that are really important. So like, if that needs to be noted, we should know that, I guess is what I'm saying. If the idea is that all of this, it's really important that all of this stays recreational, we want to make sure that that's noted on the map.
Yeah, I mean, we need a good discussion about compatible use, and putting a fire station between a park and the rest of the recreational area? No.
No, it should be like
They wanted to put,
as close to
they
the center
wanted to
as
build
possible.
a place to store transformers here in the middle of the recreation area. You know, so we need to not plop things, because you don't know where else to put it, so let's plop it here.
Not that I'm disagreeing, but I just want to point out that was the choice that the fire chief said was the optimal placement.
Yeah, the fire chief.
I'm not arguing. I'm just bringing up why that was.
So we've talked a little bit about parks, a little bit about infill. What about commercial development?
Well, we need to focus on our downtown. We have empty lots.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what is that?
That's John's.
Yeah, I'd have to look at what the use was. I actually remember I specifically called that out because I think it's whatever the use is, based on what the county has, it's something,
auto repair.
yeah, that you guys consider to be commercial. Yeah.
And we don't want to touch John's Auto. We love John's Auto.
Perfect. Within the city limits. Yeah, definitely. I will say, like, we are not going to, I always want to be careful with this. I'm never going to tell a farmer that his use isn't as productive as residences, but in the city limits, it can be more appropriate to develop some areas, and a lot of that happens, like, driven by the market anyways. So yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assumption. Next to the auto repair, yeah.
So there are houses there right now. And then over on the other side of the road, on the east side, where it's might be a nice place to put another small park and recreation where you would have maybe a restroom or a seating area or a car park or
Yeah.
there. I mean, it's kind of logical where before you go underneath the road, might be a place to go to the bathroom, water. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great location to kind of designate for some of those trail serving amenities. And then, okay, sorry, so over here.
Certain amount of
Yeah.
You could create a greenway in there. Right now it's agriculture.
That's an easy transition. Okay, I'm gonna come in here. Sorry, real fast. I want to circle this.
This is all owned by that church, but this is currently open space. So maybe we want to zone this residential, question mark?
Continue to allow it in the future.
I mean, it's open space right now.
We don't have any problems.
I kind of feel like I looked on aerial imagery because I was trying to figure out what it is. Do they use it for parking? Is that where they do like overflow on Sundays?
Next to the church,
Okay.
but it's just open space.
Okay. Good to know.
It's probably owned by the church.
Yeah. No, I know that it is. Yeah. But that's good to know. Okay.
But it'd be good to section it off, like, 'cause that's institutional, so.
Yeah. I mean, I can draw a little line there. Yeah.
Neighborhood parks.
It's not really great to have.
Let me see.
Down here along, it's on Arnold. It must be down in here. Where's Broadway? This is Broadway.
It's right across from, it's in a black area.
Yeah, so there's a little park-like thing here. It's a swing set.
Okay. Like a parklet, kind of, or a pocket park.
There's a creek that runs through town.
Okay.
What you would do is you can apply a policy.
That creek. Okay.
So there is like a little park here. You know, and
What's great, because if you're wanting to kind of discourage development there anyways, it's really a great way to utilize those spaces. I actually went out and looked at a project a couple months ago that was really cool, where they took the floodplain in a community and they built kind of reseeded it and allowed it to be kind of a habitat, but also put in park amenities that are flood resistant. So like they know this area is going to flood and it's okay, and they have designed this park area. Yeah.
Floodplain.
We could get to that point. These people would, like these folks would essentially have to do an annex.
A walking trail from that area and then follow that flat over to Father Pavilion, because it's a good area where you can do like a river walk, but it's creek walk.
Oh, I see. So where it was kind of like it steps down where the creek is.
So,
Like almost from
Like
here
from-
all the way out
yeah.
there to make it a whole park.
Like almost connect this.
maybe just add waterways, you know, so that's, I mean, because right now they're in the black.
Yeah.
But you'll need to really superimpose the floodplain.
And you could do the same for Lime Creek. Lime Creek starts at this school
Mhm.
runs meanders all the way through town and then bends out southeast. You could create a recreational zone along that where you could
Okay.
where you could deviate and go out to the lake. No one's gonna build next to it.
Yeah.
It's in the floodplain, it goes right next to the public works building. And at some point, we could create a multi-use path,
Yeah, connect all of that.
planning for a multi-use path, because people are coming in off the trail. Instead of having to ride through town to deviate and walking path from the lake.
So for residential, and as we had in the plan, upper story, uptown, downtown.
And that's for this area. This will be covered
Infill,
with a recommendation it'll be downtown. The place type is going to be downtown, which encourages second story residential. So that's covered through that. That'll be supported there. I think we're about over on time, so I want to make sure anything else we want to get on this map. I would think I guess one question I would have for you all before I head out, something I think is interesting when I was going through this area that is designated as commercial up here, but it looked like so this was maybe planned or platted for maybe like a business park.
This is a business park.
Do you
And then there's a lot of this that is actually platted as
the subdivision?
subdivision.
Yeah, I think that's this right here, I believe.
And
So does it make sense? Do you feel like we want to keep that as such? I guess the character of that area is important to me. And I'm going to actually, when we wrap up today, I'm actually going to go spend the rest of my day here driving around and taking pictures and just getting myself, it's easier for me I'll look at maps all day, but it's a little bit easier if I can see it in person.
Yeah.
But it's helpful,
some of the issues here is that the terrain isn't necessarily conducive.
Yeah, so
to
that was my
development.
question. Is this what kind of commercial use is this? Is this large scale?
You got Can Equip there, you
Okay,
have
okay.
Pizza
Some of this
Hut,
back
it's
here
a
has
hill.
got a pretty good
Okay.
slope where
Yeah.
there's a
And then you have
drainage that goes
agriculture
through
next to it.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Although you don't see a lot of water in it, but it's a gully. So topo, we need to really consider topo.
Because this is a big drop
I'm
off here.
a civil engineer.
That's very helpful. Okay, good to know.
But if you're going to do commercial, it would be nice to connect the industrial and commercial along here, except for this is on right here, which is the trail. And then you've got that creek.
So almost like chunking this off. We want to keep, let's say that this area is designated for those trail serving amenities, maybe a little bit before it gets to the underpass. But you think it would make sense to maybe extend commercial here and extend commercial here a little bit along the corridors?
Topo won't support
yeah,
this,
it's
'cause
a
slope
this is a
down.
highway, this is embankment,
Okay.
this is farm field. They just incorporated this in so that they could.
So this is likely to stay, you think, undeveloped, these two areas?
Yeah, I suppose you could do something down here, but it's like 15 feet lower in
Yeah,
elevation
could be some
than
grade
this.
challenges. Okay.
It might be a good place, though, to put trail amenities all along here, or a park, or
Although we really want to bring those people down here. But prune new camping or something, maybe there. But it's privately owned now. It's probably probably agriculture. I think you need to look at the ownership in there. I'm guessing this part's probably ag.
But future use, it would be a good place to, if somebody wanted to bring some kind of access road down in here, you could do, because it's lower than the highway, it's not going to be too noisy. You could do some type of primitive camping for the trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Bicyclists
neighborhood
could just
parks,
get
I
right off
think,
the
or
trail and-
something. We could look at.
One thing I will note is that we do have large-scale parks and rec called out here. In the place type framework, I'm a firm believer that a complete neighborhood includes some small parks.
Yeah.
So rather than making, if there is a lot that is vacant, let's say this area is designated as a neighborhood. per the place type framework. If someone right here, their house is in poor condition, they raise their structure, and you want to develop it as a pocket park,
Yeah.
the way that our framework is written, you do not need to like amend the comprehensive plan to allow that. That's already allowed. So any large park and rec amenities, we want to make sure we note them, but the small ones, the really just neighborhood serving ones, yeah, or even like a very small,
Because there's really no
like community
parks
garden
here.
or something.
This,
I don't usually
this
call
is
those
Pig
out.
Park, right? This is your,
Yeah, that's West
Okay.
Side.
so this building is probably institutional,
Mhm.
because that's a
There's a firehouse there.
firehouse,
There's institutional, and
So-
next to it is
And above it is,
And
okay,
is the
good
little
to know.
West Side Park.
Okay, perfect.
But it would be nice to say if the city owns anything in the black, it would be nice for the houses in this area, there's a trailer park to have some kind of little park for the kids, instead of them having to travel
All the way over there, yeah.
Would it be something we could do to label it as a park if anything is in the black? So that way it could be something that could be
future
produced?
use, yeah.
I
And then
could, I can do that. I
right
can
here,
also,
they need a park, they need a park too.
in the text of the plan, so for each of these place types, there are descriptions. If we have vacant land, I think it's actually already written such the framework is like, if there is undeveloped area adjacent to housing with appropriate infrastructure. So, right, like I'm not going to say that maybe the park should go, I don't know, right by a highway, but if it's walkable and connected, that would be a supported and kind of recommended
Is this
development.
what's this say? Is that a park too?
well, it's green space.
Yeah, open space.
There's a swale that goes across there, but the city owns it.
But that
But-
would be great for
But,
a park.
you know, you could add, some
Benches.
neighbors,
Yeah.
because there's not, you know, kids need a place to play. We had an empty lot we played in.
Right.
But, you know,
Well, and there's only one tiny little park here.
There's what? No kids? Okay.
There's no other parks anywhere out here, and if this
Yeah, I
becomes
asked
more
that if
commercial.
maybe, like they had an unsold lot, we could just kind of scoop a little corner and make a
Yeah.
meditation park.
Okay.
And I was told that the deal was who would maintain it.
And that is a fair consideration. You don't want to have vacant land, but there's more involved in that than I could speak to probably.
Is that Logan
Point.
Point? Shouldn't that be incorporated in their subdivision plans as a park place?
It
Well, it
depends.
should.
It depends on how your regulations are written, and that could be something after the plan is adopted that you maybe look at changing. So a lot of subdivision regulations include if you are developing a certain number of acres or a certain number of dwelling units, there is a requirement to dedicate a portion of that as open space or park area. But you have to have that in your code, otherwise.
Yeah, we
I
need to have it.
suspect that the idea may have been is,
I don't know.
guess what, the school's across the street,
That's
and
true.
there's a playground at the school.
Yeah.
What?
I mean, I grew up down here by where the old elementary school was, and, I mean, that was part of our park. We'd go down and play
Families are gonna want that.
in the school.
Yeah. Playground.
So, but, you know, that's the, you know, complete street safe routes.
Yeah.
Kids
Connection
running
there.
across the
Mhm.
street.
So can all of this area be, since it's in the waterway, can this be just Parks and Rec, future use?
Well, you need to be
Yeah.
real careful about ownership down in here,
Mhm.
because what's owned by the railroad, is off limits.
Right.
And so,
What's this? So within city limits, and is this industrial, and does it go with the?
yeah, I would think it
Oh, so
should
this
be.
is all, this purple is industrial. I think that the reason why that is different was an ownership change, because I think, I mean, a lot of this, of course, is railroad way, and then owned by the railroad, but this, because it is called out separately, I think our technician did it because it's a change in ownership, but I can look and see if that,
Well, in all
to
of
make sure that's
all of
noted
these-
correctly.
All of these black gaps, we need to identify all these black pieces, right?
You mean like,
What kind of use?
yeah, so generally, I'm going to tell you that I sorry, I didn't mean to bump you. I'm going to recommend that this is developed as
Residential.
with a fit, something that fits within a residential character. because
Well,
it's surrounded by
Is it-
residential.
Is this what used to be the trailer park? Probably, Marcus.
Yeah, that, probably that and this.
Mm-hmm. I
It'd be a
remember,
great RV park. It's all set up for RV.
oh, with infrastructure, and yeah, I guess that makes sense
Then you
because
can
it's got
come
the.
right in and you park here with your RVs. It's got so many spots.
Would you
and then
write that
can go
for me,
out to
please?
the lake.
Do you all have? I know you usually have your meeting at noon. Do you have stuff? Do you have anyone coming in for a case?
We don't have anybody. We don't have a meeting today.
Okay.
Yeah, last week.
Okay, I just we're going over a little bit, and which is fine with me. But I don't want if someone's waiting on to come in for their zone change case, I don't want to be holding them up.
No, we don't have anything
Okay.
else.
We could just sit
I
them in
just-
the corner and tell them to be quiet.
Well, yeah, you know.
What about this area out here? The big, huge black spot.
Yeah, I don't know what's under there. I can't
Vacant
see
or
it well enough.
undeveloped.
See, and again, there's some drainages.
There's a creek that runs.
Yeah, you can see the
Yeah,
this
Yeah,
there.
and
I'm not sure that's a creek, I think it's just.
a line, a dip.
A weird.
Where the water
Oh,
will-
drainage.
will run.
Yeah.
it's a drainage. But there is, I'm trying to,
This is Walnut.
the one on the,
This is
maybe I'm
Crap.
thinking more over here. There's a drainage over in here. And
well,
the city
yeah,
has,
through the city,
Mm-hmm.
and part of it is
a canal.
private property, part of it the city has bought. You know, I think something that is valuable, and I'm sure that the
Yeah.
county GIS could do it, I had them do it years ago, but it's out of date now, is get us a map that shows all the city-owned property.
Yeah, we can definitely run that pretty easy.
And, then we have a better idea what's developable, readily developable.
Especially for parks and those kinds of amenities.
This is city-owned. And I suspect at one time it was, anticipated for future
Yeah.
cemetery,
Mhm.
expansion.
This is on a hill.
This is,
The dump.
this is a dump. This is construction debris. It's inappropriate, it's ugly.
And there's a huge drop off here down to this field.
So this is like city. I mean, this is of course the cemetery, but then and this is all city owned. So this is like
It's like the industrial dump for concrete and stone and
so
brick.
kind of like where Public Works is
big-
putting
And
stuff
everybody
maybe.
and their mother.
Okay,
Yeah. You
but
can
it's
go
not like
there.
it's not a sanctioned dumping place.
No, I don't know I don't know the legalities of it.
Okay, I can look into that and see.
You don't have to do it at midnight.
No.
It's hard because then when
Just go out
I know how
there
this
with
goes,
your
and like one
trailer,
person
and
puts
there you
stuff,
go.
and then and then it's like
Well,
then everyone does.
And something we need, at some point we need to talk about is access, because people are told, dump your stuff there, or you can go get dirt there, or whatever. But what happens is we have people
Trucks.
going through our cemetery to get there,
Oh,
in big vehicles. It's just not
Heavy,
the kind of
yeah,
traffic
hauling.
that you want to have through a cemetery.
yeah.
And at one time, I thought access was more from up in here, and people didn't come through the cemetery, but somehow it's become the thoroughfare through the cemetery to get there.
So,
Okay, and I think actually maybe we were missing one other person. Somebody else. He snuck out, right? Well, no. The gentleman that was sitting over here. Okay. Yeah. So I think I'll take a few more comments here on this, and then just for your guys' purposes for info. So I'll take this. I'm gonna put all. We're kind of in a time crunch because we want to get this back to you quick. So we're gonna work to get this future land use map updated to be to get the existing land use map turned into a future land use map, and then get a draft out to you all.
it's right here.
And so we have, so I will have the final draft for review to Thatcher for on 5/14. So So he is going to look over that, give me some quick comments, get it back to me, and then he will send it out to you all for review. It is going to be a quick turnaround, so I will need, if you want to send comments in advance of the meeting, this is not your last chance to send comments. We will make edits after the meeting, but if you want to send them before the final draft, once you have the final draft, it's a week to get them to me, so I have time to make those changes to the final draft before we meet.
Yeah, so the 24th I can't make, so I don't know if we were gonna change that date or not.
The 28th?
The 28th, yeah.
Okay.
28th.
Okay, I'll need to get with Thatcher then and see.
And I'm good with whatever date you guys decide.
Because if we need to change it, then that might give you guys a little bit more time to review, to send comments.
And I don't know, I think everybody but me can make the 28th.
Okay. I mean, it's ideal, of course, to have everyone in the same room, so we can see if we can make that work.
I'll be on the road.
You don't need to look at this
Coming out
thing down here because
I was
if I'm looking at this right, this is the library, the Masonic
Well,
home.
and it's also Memorial Day weekend.
That had
push it
been
back.
a funeral home,
Yeah.
it's now.
That is that Monday.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of two conversations here, and I can't.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's Memorial Day weekend, I don't know
Yeah.
if people thought about that. Are you really available on Memorial Day weekend?
I mean, I will be here, but if you guys are not going to be here, that's not going to work. So I can get with Thatcher, and we can talk about maybe moving that out. Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, this is the library. So maybe that's, at least I think it is, library. So that's institutional. And the old Masonic temple, which is empty. Then this is, it had been a funeral home, it's now a house. It was a house, then a funeral home, then a house. And then this is a closed church, I think.
I think that this is this a multifamily structure of some kind? Because they
No.
have it denoted for, okay. So,
At least not currently. There are some,
and then for this, the library, we'll definitely want to call it out as institutional, but, oh yeah, you've got it there, okay. But for the future